This is the Aprilia SR GT 200. It's an Italian scooter with a price to match, like its cousin under the Piaggio brand, the Vespa. This SR GT 200 costs around 250 to 260,000 pesos. So, what are you getting for that? Long story short, maybe it's also fewer extra features than others in its class, but you do get that Aprilia heritage, prestige, and style, first of all, particularly in this sport variant with the Aprilia red rims. But you also get a legitimately performing scooter that's got really good comfort, smooth and ample power, and even some headroom for adventuring. It's been described as an SUV on two wheels by other reviewers, but I think it would be more accurately described as like a luxury crossover. So first, let's refresh your memory on the key specs in case this is the first review about it that you're watching. The Aprilia SR GT 200 is powered by a 174cc single-cylinder engine which puts out 17.4 horsepower at 8,500 RPM along with 16.5 Newton-meters of torque at 7,000 RPM. In my experience, the bike feels faster and more powerful than the modest figure would suggest. During long uphills, the bike just kept giving more as I climbed up in the rev range, beating some other bikes I've ridden in the 200+cc range. And this is also in line with my experience with another Aprilia, the 210 660, which punches far above its displacement for its power. Next thing we should talk about is what I think the best performing aspect of the bike is, its suspension. Up front, we have 33mm Showa front forks with 122mm of travel, and on the rear we have twin Showa shocks with 5-position adjustable preload and 102mm of travel. That's pretty similar to Honda's ADV 160's Showa suspension, which have 133mm up front and 100mm of travel in the rear. However, the Honda lacks adjustability of preload in the rear, which can have a big effect depending on your weight or if you ride too up. During my time with the bike, it's the suspension performance that impressed me the most, particularly the front forks. We'll talk about that more in a bit. You also get a pretty good 175mm of minimum ground clearance. You even get an upswept exhaust for more clearance. It rides on Michelin Anarchy Dual Sport tires, 14 inches up front and 13 inches at the rear, and they're tubeless as they always are for scooters. For brakes, you get a 260mm wavy disc with ABS up front, single channel only, and a 220mm disc at the back. Actuating the brakes are these very nice long levers that feel quite premium, and the left lever uses a combi brake system that partially actuates the front brake. The two-tone leather seat is wide and roomy to go with the spacious step boards, and for me it's just the right firmness for all-day comfort. It's got a pretty premium look and feel that's above and beyond cheaper scooters, accentuated by this Aprilia branding over at the back. Seat height is at 799mm, and this is what it looks like with me sitting on it at almost 5'7", 169 centimeters. Wet weight is a bit heavy at 144 kilos. The step board is split as with most maxi scooters, and you can put your feet in a slightly forward position if you want. To be honest, if you're not very tall, this adds up to a bike that's a bit awkward to mount. You tend to need to throw your legs over it. Worth mentioning, the bike starts up silently like modern Japanese scooters, which was a pleasant surprise to me. Here's a quick sound check. The key is a normal key, no fancy keyless starting here. It gets a 9-liter fuel tank with a reported fuel consumption of 38 to 42 kilometers per liter, and I was able to hit that 42 number even with lots of uphills and riding a bit spirited in the twisties, so that's pretty impressive, and that'll give you a theoretical range of almost 380 kilometers. Quite handily, there is a fuel range indicator on the LCD, which is unusual for this segment. It also comes with an auto start-stop system if you want to get maximum fuel economy riding in stop-and-go traffic. Speaking of the dash, it's basic LCD, light on dark, and you have your big speedo, a rev counter, tachometer, which is a nice touch, along with a clock, fuel gauge, odometer, ambient temperature, and engine temperature, and you can toggle to display range, battery voltage, and current fuel consumption. It does unusually lack trip meters. Lights are LED all around, and they look pretty stylish, both front and rear. The rear integrated turn signals are a particularly nice touch. Talking about styling, it's a bike that you can easily mistake for an Aprilia sport bike if you just see it in your rear view mirrors. It's got an unmistakably Aprilia look and feel. Preference for that is subjective, of course. Highlights, of course, include this front bodywork, and this unit comes equipped with an OEM crash guard that closely follows the shape of the bike. My favorite bit of design here actually is this really solid looking silver handlebar clamp with the Aprilia branding. It's also got this futuristic looking rear with a short lip fender and tire hugger to go with these chunky silver grab rails. Most reviewers have said that they don't like the faux carbon fiber panels, but I don't mind them that much. I guess it fits the faux sport bike vibe that the bike is going for. Alright, with the specs out of the way, let's talk about what I really care about, which is, what is this bike like to ride? My focus really was to see how it would fare on my kind of weekend adventure tour. About 200 kilometers there and back again, up the twisties and down into a light fun trail for some sightseeing. You can watch that full video via the link up here or in the description. But basically, here's what I found. The SR GT 200 looks sporty and does have power high up in its rev range to back that up. The power is ample and surprising to the point that with some effort I was able to keep up with my buddy, a good rider on a KTM 390 adventure. Climbing steep roads wasn't a problem, especially given time to climb up the revs. It's also delivered in a smooth and refined way that's both friendly and still satisfying. Handling-wise, it's more biased to comfort than sharpness. My riding buddy, King on the KTM, summed it up best when he described it as a stable glider. While it is, based on other reviews, a flickable enough bike that can lean deep into corners thanks to these larger tires and high ground clearance, for me, it's the stability and comfort that really stand out. I'm not accustomed enough to how scooters feel to really lean it far either. The front forks in particular, as I said, are outstanding. They're well damped and they provide a perfect balance of comfort and responsiveness as I took the bike up the twisties and then down a rocky trail with some deep ruts. With some judicious line picking, I didn't even bottom them out. My arms weren't tired at all as they might be on a conventional small scooter that can't soak up the terrain with the front forks. Of course, the small wheels are still more disturbed by the terrain compared to, actual dual sport and bigger bikes. But overall, how it handled the terrain at decent speed for a scooter impressed me. In terms of ground clearance, I did get rocks clattering off the center stand every now and then, so you should be careful about that. Now, the rear shocks, meanwhile, have been described by other reviewers as stiff. Now, I'm not sure, honestly, if they were able to dial in the adjustable preload here at the back. Because when I got the bike from the shop, the tires were at half the recommended pressure and the preload was set to 3 out of 5. I bumped it down to 2, meaning less preload, and it softened it up nicely. Along with inflating the tires, this tightened up the handling while also improving the comfort. So, if you're gonna test ride or review this bike or any bike, don't forget to always check your tire pressure and also your preload settings. With the shocks set to the right preload for my weight, I found them to be just right for comfort. My back didn't feel tired at all after my little adventure ride. But I did experience bottoming them out once or twice when stumbling into some deeper ruts on the trail. I also appreciated the motorcycle-style handlebar and the riding position. It's perfectly neutral, not too wide or tall. So overall, I found it a surprisingly great bike to ride for this, like a light adventure of the sort that I would want a lighter bike for, but that I wouldn't dare bring my Vespa on. It's not an adventure bike, obviously, but it's got performance headroom to have some fun on the road and on light trails. It's also more rugged in disposition than something like a Vespa, so I didn't feel as guilty roughing it up a little bit. Although, it is still Italian, and you'll likely still pay a premium to get anything fixed or replaced on it. So, I've established that this is a good bike for fun, but how is it as a daily? I mean, after all, Aprilia markets this mainly as a comfy but sporty urban commuter. So, here are my thoughts on that. For a daily scooter, the SR GT 200 is honestly pretty big for its displacement. See how it looks beside my Interceptor? And this is how it looks beside a KTM 390 Adventure. I've ridden a lot of big bikes, and this bike feels relatively huge when you're on it, way bigger than something like a Royal Enfield Hunter 350, which weighs almost 50 kilos more than this. So, it does have legit big bike presence. That's because of the maxi scooter form factor with the big front bodywork, the footboards, and the storage below. Speaking of which, the storage is pretty good as well. It's not deep enough to fit anything bigger than a small size full face helmet, but it'll fit most open face helmets and a bunch of other stuff as well. In my ride, I was able to fit a lot of camera accessories, 2 tumblers, and other knickknacks. You also get this cubby hole at the front that contains a USB charging port and snugly fits a mobile phone at the top. But I wouldn't keep a phone in there plugged in unless you're using a short cable with a flat L-shaped head. For pillion comfort, unfortunately, I didn't have time to test this, but what I can say is first, this has some of the best looking passenger foot pegs I've ever seen, much bigger and more practical than the nearly non-existent ones on a Vespa. There's ample room on the elevated rear seat, and the rear grab bar is quite chunky for holding onto. The bike's design also makes it so it won't ruin the look to add a black rear top box, further adding to both pillion comfort and storage. Going back to the bike's size though, it's a bit tall and wide, so unless you're used to riding tall bikes, it could be a handful to commute with if you are below 5'6" and you need to put your legs down often for safety and confidence. Same goes for maneuvering the bike on uneven ground. Regular 150cc scooters are very easy to back out sitting on them in any situation, but the height and heft of the SR GT require more technique and/or strength. On pavement though, it's easy enough to maneuver with its wide handlebar turn radius and neutral handling. So honestly, I personally wouldn't choose this as a daily over my Vespa Primavera 150. But what you trade off for size and weight, you get back in additional comfort and additional performance. And surprisingly, it gives better fuel economy than any modern Vespa, which get a pretty poor 29 to 31 kilometers per liter compared to over 40 on the SR GT 200. All that said, it's a scooter. It's twist and go, fun to rev out when the traffic opens up. You can filter in traffic easily despite its size. It holds its line very well and will probably carry a pillion with more stability than any small scooter. And the comfort and storage pay dividends if you're taking it out every day. Maybe it's not the best choice for a beginner or for your only bike, but if you've got experience and maybe a stable of other bikes, you'll love commuting with the SR GT 200. Which brings me to my final point. Whom do I think this bike is for anyway? You'll notice that throughout this review, I compared it repeatedly to Vespas, not the ADV 160, the Kymco KRV 180, and any other Kymco maxi scooter, the Yamaha X-Max, etc., etc. And that's because, honestly, if you're not looking for an Italian or European scooter, I don't think this is for you. Because, again, let's be honest, an Italian bike is not a purchase of the mind, it's a purchase of the heart. So I think the Aprilia SR GT 200 is for, honestly, someone that maybe owns other motorcycles already. Maybe you have some other Aprilia, Ducati, or a BMW in your garage already, and you're looking for something fun, easy, an urban commuter that's stylish, a cafe hopper that's also good for spirited weekend scooter adventures. And you also want the exclusivity of something like a Vespa, but with a sporty, modern aesthetic instead, while having more performance, comfort, and versatility than a Vespa. You could kind of say it's like a macho alternative to spending your money on a Vespa with a rare color, but it's also cheaper and way more adventurous than something like an Italjet dragster. And that's it for my look at the Aprilia SR GT 200. If you want to check one out or test ride one here in Manila, you can head over to Moto Italia, that's actually Vespa Green Hills, who kindly lent me this with permission to rough it up a little bit. With that, thanks for watching, hit like and subscribe if this was helpful, and I'll see you on the next.